Good morning and welcome to Coffee Time. It is good to be with you this morning and to start a new study. We had some introductions last week, but we're really going to get into it this week. I'm going to check our signal output and things. It looks like we have a pretty good signal this morning. If you get any delays, let me know. Or if you cannot receive me clearly, let me know. I'm logging into something that'll help us determine how we can do that. Um, let's see. Good morning. You'll notice I'm wearing the Rivervale shirt. We need to keep Rivervale in mind and the vital ministry that has for all of us. And let's see here. In our scriptures today, we're going to be learning about the role of women in the ancient world. We're going to be learning about um, the need for kings that the Bible makes, plus the case that's made for how society just doesn't do what it's supposed to do when it doesn't have God available, and that's pretty serious stuff. Good morning, Miss Lane. Good morning, Miss Phyllis. Glad to have you joining us this morning. Really appreciate that. And to get started, I would like for you to get your Bibles. I'll just get mine out here. We'll get our Bibles out together. And I want you to turn to Judges. And we're going to go to 19. And the reason why we're starting there for a study on the kings is that this is really the last word that we have before we start that cycle into learning about kings. So what I want you to do is get it out. Let's find it in our text. Let's see here. It's towards the beginning of the Bible. And we're going to find it right after Joshua. And it's going to be before Samuel. And it's going to be it's the last few pages before Samuel. And so as we get into Judges, and a real quick trick that I learned a long time ago is that if you take a Bible, you open it in half, and then you take the right or the left half, open that in half, you're going to be within a pitch of a horseshoe to where you need to be. So here we go, chapter 19. And last week we were talking about some of the symbolism and some of the things that should jump out at us. Like, for example, that we have a concubine who is being treated as a wife when it's convenient and treated as property when it's not convenient. And then when the systems of protection for everyone in the ancient world are breaking down. The father, who should have been protective of his daughter, was not, was more interested in the money, quite honestly. The Levite was not practicing what the Levite should have been practicing. Obviously, this was a person who wanted wealth and money and power and stuff. He obviously was, and when I say obviously, in the way he was carrying himself, the fact that he had servants, the fact that he brought two donkeys with him, the fact that when he arrived, he had already negotiated for the concubine before, so money had to have been exchanged. And then when he does arrive, he refers to her as his wife. That's really important. And the fact that she stayed with the father for 4 months. Well, that's a giveaway. That indicates that that's biblical code language. That indicates that she was showing she was pregnant. Now, and so the Levite wanted to retrieve his property, and if there was a child that was to be born, then by golly, that Levite wanted that child. Either if it's a male, then that carries on the Levite's name. If it's a female, then that is someone who can be traded, bartered, or sold. And so, as cruel and as crass as that sounds, that's what happens when society stops caring for the most vulnerable. And that's the point, is that when society reaches a point where it is utter chaos, then horrible things can happen. And in the book of Judges, that is the case that is made for a king. So just really quick, I'm going to grab a few verses and then we'll bounce forward. In 19:1, for example, in those days there was no king in Israel, and a certain Levite, and it goes on. And so the the case that is made is that society itself cannot operate on its own. And when society leaves God, then utter chaos is going to happen and horrible things are going to be done to people. So let's pick it up where we left it off. And here we go, is that this Levite comes from the northern part of the country in the Ephraim area. And he was getting near Jerusalem. And he says here, or his servant says to his master, "Come now, let us turn aside to the city of the Jebusites." Now that's Jerusalem. It was known as Jebus. So it was, "Let us go to the city of the Jebusites and spend the night in it." But the Levite said to him, "We will not turn aside into a city of foreigners who do not belong to the people of Israel, but we will continue to Gibeah." Now remember, Gibeah was a pretty important worship site. Samuel hung out there. We had a lot of things happen in Gibeah. Gibeah is an important area, or was. And so the Levite was heading to that area. Then he said to his servant, "Come, let us try to reach one of these places and spend the night at Gibeah or Ramah." Now remember, Ramah also was an important site too. Samuel was pretty good there too. So they passed on and went on their way, and the sun was going down, and they were near the city of Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. That's the tribe of Benjamin, that is. They turned aside there to go in and spend the night at Gibeah. He went in and sat down in the square of the city, but no one took them in to spend the night. Now, let's map this out and understand what's going on here. First off, this is a chapter, these two chapters are chapters of extremes. I got your message, Miss Elaine, and will do. Will do. So this is a chapter of extremes. And when we get to Gibeah, we got to remember is that the Levite said, "I don't want to spend the night with foreigners. I want to spend the night with people of Israel." And so he goes on to Gibeah, which is supposed to be settled by the tribe of Benjamin. He walks into the square and no one takes him in. Okay, flag number one, hospitality codes are not being met. In hospitality codes of the ancient world, you extended hospitality to the stranger because you didn't know what was going to happen to you when you were out and became the stranger. And so there were no inns, there were no, you didn't find places to stay. And so people had to take you into their home for protection, for feeding, for taking care of you, and that was a courtesy that was extended to any traveler. So this was not something unusual. This was a common thing. The fact that no one invited him in is unusual. It was very unusual and indicates something. Now, I want you to recall back to when we were reading in Genesis, the story that we read concerning Lot and the city or the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. Now remember, Lot was at the front gate, and when a stranger came in, Lot grabbed a hold of that stranger, wanted to get him away from there, and then put them in, his own home. So we got a parallel going on here right now that may not be directly apparent yet, but it will become very apparent very, very soon. And so here we go as we venture in. Then in evening there was an old man coming in from work in the field, and the man was from the hill country of Ephraim, and he was residing in Gibeah. Now remember, the Levite is from Ephraim, the old man is from Ephraim. The people of the place were Benjamites. When the old man looked up and saw the wayfarer in the open square of the city, he said, "Where are you going, and where did you come from?" And he answered, "We are passing from Bethlehem in Judah to the remote parts of the hill country of Ephraim, from which I come, and I went to Bethlehem in Judah, and I am going my way to home. No one has offered to take me in. We are your servants. We have straw and fodder for our donkeys, with bread and wine for me and the woman." Now, point this out. He didn't refer to her as a concubine. He didn't refer to her as his wife. He referred to her as me and the woman. Okay? And so the personhood of this individual is suddenly stripped away. And then notice that his servant, which has been called servant up until this very moment, is now not a servant, but a young man along with them. Okay? Language is important in the Bible, and when the Bible does things like this, we got to pay attention to it. We got to pay attention to it. So here we go, and we need nothing more. So they're self-sufficient. They'll take care of their own stuff. All we need is a place to crash. All right. So in effect, they were couch surfing. That's what they were doing. They were couch surfing. So here we go. And the old man said, Peace be with you. I'll care for all your wants. Only do not spend the night in the square. So he brought them into his house and fed the donkeys, washed their feet, ate, and drank. Now, that washing of the feet was a very important ceremonial task. It wasn't just to make certain that they didn't track mud into the house. This was a sign and a symbol that the old man was extending hospitality and was going to care for these individuals as if they were members of his own family. That's the significance of this. And so the old man, maybe thinking that he has some kinship to the Levite who's coming from the same country that he comes from, or the clan area that he comes from, extends his hospitality, cleans his feet, feeds him, does all the things right up to that point. Now remember, when Abram encountered the three angels prior to the story as we go on to Sodom and Gomorrah, is that he rushes up to them and he extends hospitality. He takes the calf, and slaughters it for them to eat. He offers them water. He offers to wash their feet. He does all those things. It was a common thing that was done. And if you didn't extend hospitality, then there was something that was very, very wrong. And that's what's being foreshadowed here, is that because there was no king, because there was no connection to God, people were doing whatever they want. Okay, here we go. Now we're in the city. While they were enjoying themselves, the men of the city, a perverse lot, surrounded the house and started pounding on the door. Now this is a parallel to what happened when the angels were getting Lot. Okay, remember that. They said to the old man, the master of the house, Bring out the man who came into your house so that we may have intercourse with him. And the man and the master of the house went out to them and said to them, No, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Since the man is my guest, do not do this vile thing. And so, while the Levite is in the care or the hospitality of the old man, it was the old man's responsibility to protect him, care for him, defend him, and because that was what the hospitality code required. If you remember, Lot attempted the same thing. Now, interestingly enough, the solution is very similar. So here we go. Here we go. Now, when these dudes show up and they say these things, okay, and the same dudes show up that said the same things um, in our story with Lot. Remember, this has absolutely nothing to do with sexual intercourse. It has nothing to do with that. This has everything to do with devaluing human beings. It has everything to do with the destruction of the human being. God created the human in the image of God, and so there's sacred worth. So at some level, everybody has sacred worth. Now, these folks are attempting to exert their control over that value, that sacred worth, and destroy it, take it away, own it. So this was something that was not all that common in the ancient world. It did happen from time to time. We have examples of it even in the Bible, particularly the stories that we read about David in Scripture. And just as a quick example is that, oftentimes in ancient world battle, that folks would go out and grab a hold of the stuff. And if you had that stuff, then, you had rights and privileges according to having that stuff. One of the first examples I can think of is that when David left the palace fleeing his son, who was trying to kill him, the very first thing his son did was go up to the roof and have intercourse with all the ladies that were up there, because that indicated that he was now king, because he possessed David's stuff. So that possession of stuff, that possession of personhood, gave you power in the ancient world. Is it right? No. Is it something that is abhorrent? Yes. But That is the context that we got to remember about this. And it is a vile thing when you steal someone's personhood. Um, and this is about violence. This is about domination. This is about destruction. Okay, total destruction. That's what this is about. Okay, so let's go on. And then the guy, he says, "Hey, don't do this. This is horrible. Here's my virgin daughter. Boop. Oh, and here's his concubine. Here you go. Take him, take him, take him, take him, and do whatever you want." Remember what Lot did? He was going to chuck his daughters out the door too. I mean, and so he violates not hospitality, but he violates the family code. He violates it. And notice that he took the stuff that belonged to the Levite without the Levite blinking and was even offering that. So all of the structures for protection are eroded away, and that human beings are being treated as not just property, but disposable property. Disposable property. I had a person once try to or describe this section as it's just think of everybody who's not a main character as being toilet paper, and that's about what it was like. And I looked at that and I thought, that is a horrible way to think about this. But over the years, I'm beginning to come around to that thinking. It's just human life was so cheap and just so much in disregard. So here we go. Let's keep going. And okay, he says, "Let me bring them out to you now and ravish them and do whatever you want with them. But against this man do not do such a vile thing." But the men would not listen to him. And so the man seized his concubine and put her out to them. Okay, now we're switching who's who. The man being the Levite, not the old man. Okay? The man being the Levite, not the old man. So what happened is that they were going to make their move and go get him. He grabbed the pregnant concubine and chucked her out the door. Okay? So that's what that means. When he seized and put her out, that's a polite way of saying he chucked her out the door to him. He was wanting to save his own skin. And they wantonly raped her and abused her all through the night until the morning, and as the dawn began to break, they let her go. As morning appeared, the woman came and fell at the door of the man's house where her master was until it was light. That's huge. Okay? So I want you to break this down. Here it is, this person who was treated poorly and horribly, who was abused, and treated less than human, who's chucked out to save his own skin. She crawls back to the house. She's alive. She's alive at this point. And she's pregnant. Alive and pregnant. I want you to think about that. Okay? And so, in the morning, now remember, now all of a sudden, he's not the man, he's not the Levite. Now his title is master. So not only did she lose her personhood, she also lost her rank as concubine and is nothing more than a slave at this point. In the morning, her master got up, and so notice how the degrees of things changed. Okay, concubine, then suddenly wife, and then suddenly husband, and then back to concubine, and now something below that. So here we go. In the morning her master got up, opened the doors of the house, and when he went out to go on his way, there was his concubine laying in the door of the house, with her hands on the threshold. "Get up," he said, "we're going." Wouldn't you just like to slap him upside the head, knock him in the head with a club? But there was no answer. Then he put her on the donkey, and the man set out for home. Now, where is his other servant? We don't know. We don't know. We just don't know. And then we get to verse 29. And when he entered his house, he took a knife, grasping the concubine, and he cut her into 12 pieces, limb by limb, and sent her throughout all the territory of Israel. Then he commanded the men whom he sent, saying, "Thus shall happen to you, all the Israelites. Has such a thing ever happened since the days the Israelites came out of the land of Egypt until this day? Consider it, take counsel, and speak out." Okay, and so this guy takes the concubine, his property, and cuts her up. In the process, of course, she dies. Now, the pieces that are sent out, this is symbolic of the blood covenant that was made by God and Abraham. Now, remember, in that covenant, it was one-sided, and you had all the pieces, parts of animals that were lined up in a long line, and God, through the power of that the flame Holy Spirit, goes through them. That is symbolic, saying that if I break my word, this will happen to me. That's what that's all about. And so he's cut her up, sent it to the heads of the tribes, and said, "Hey, look, there's something terrible that happened, and we got to do something about this. And if you don't honor your agreements, if you don't honor the covenant, guess what? This will happen to you." Notice that his responsibility, his burden, his onus is never brought up. In fact, we have very few details of what happened. And so what we also have this is has such a thing ever happened since the day the Israelites came up from the land of Egypt until this day? Okay, what is exactly he's talking about? Is he talking about the way hospitality was thrown away? Was he talking about the way that he treated his concubine slash wife slash slave slash concubine? Is he talking about how the people of Israel aren't acting like the people of Israel? Because he avoided going to a foreigner city in favor of the people of Israel, and something bad happened. Notice he takes no responsibility for any of his actions at all. And so he sends that out. Now, the words say that he commanded. Then he commanded the men whom he sent the letter. Commanded. That's an important word for us. And if your Bible has something different, please note that, circle it, underline it, highlight it. And the reason why you want to note it differently is that this is just a Levite. How in the world could he command anything? Well, the quick answer is that this wasn't just any ordinary Levite. The not quick answer is that we really don't know. We know that uh, the inferences are is that there's something going on here. We don't know exactly what. But then we go back to when we go back to what is being said at the very beginning. In those days, there was no king in Israel. So there was everyone was doing their own thing, and bad things would happen. Okay, so let's get into chapter 20 real quick. Chapter 20, and then all the Israelites came out from Dan to Beersheba, including the land of Gilead, and the congregations assembled into one body before the Lord at Mizpah. And so they all gathered together, all of them. They all gathered together, and they were at the place where offerings were made, and they were going to do something here. The chiefs of all the people of all the tribes of Israel presented themselves in the assembly of the people of God, 400,000 foot soldiers bearing arms. Now, was it really 400,000? No, that's just a number to express it was a very large group of people. Now the Benjamites heard that the people of Israel had gone up to Mizpah, and the Israelites say, "Tell us, how did this criminal act come about?" And the Levite, now notice this, the Levite, the husband of the woman who was murdered, how did we get from where we came from to here? Just think about that just for a moment. Talk about changing the story. He goes from being the one who cuts her up and actually kills her. He's the one that put her in jeopardy to begin with. He's the one that messed up right from the get-go. And yet now he's the grieving widower. The Levite, the husband of the woman who was murdered, answered, "I came up to Gibeah that belongs to Benjamin, and I and my concubine spent the night. The lords of Gibeah rose up against me." Now, the lords of Gibeah rose up against me. So what that meant was that the people that were the rulers of the city rose up against him. Well, that wasn't true. "The lords of Gibeah rose up against me and surrounded the house at night." Oh no! "They intended to kill me." And then rape my concubine until she died. Dun, dun, dun. You know, it's difficult to not get just really riled up over this because of just the bald-faced lies this dude is saying. Here we go. Then I took my concubine and cut her into pieces, sent her throughout the whole extent of the Israel's territory, for they have committed a vile outrage in Israel. So now you, the Israelites, all of you, give your advice and counsel here. Okay? Did they try to kill him? Well, he probably wouldn't have been killed. Would they have taken his stuff? Yeah, most certainly they'd have taken his stuff. They would have left him high and dry. Yes, they would have. But would they have killed the concubine and the servant that was with him? No, they would have taken it. That would have belonged to somebody. And remember, this is the denial of personhood is what they're after. They want to dominate. They want to be violent. They want to be aggressive. And here, the Levite spins an entirely different story. He doesn't talk about his own complicit behavior about chucking her out the door to save his own skin. He wasn't talking about how he turned away from the city of Jerusalem that would have probably taken him in because he was fearful of foreigners. Now, just a side note, God had commanded the people of Israel to be light to the world and to introduce or to show a way for the world to know God. Being a person of faith and one who was charged with the care of the Ark of the Covenant, the care of the tabernacle, the care for the oil and the incense and the offerings, would have known that. Here we go. This is verse 8. All the people got up as one, and they're saying, we will not any of us go to our tents, nor we will return to our houses. But now this is what we're going to do to Gibeah. We will all go up against it by lot. Now, what that means is that all the different tribes gathered together are not working as one. They're working as individual units. And so they put a name in a hat and they draw it out one at a time. Who goes first? Who goes second? Who goes third? Who goes fourth? That's what that means. And so we will take 10,000 of our 100. We'll take 10 men of 100 throughout the tribes of Israel, and 100 of 1,000, and 1,000 of 10,000 to bring provisions to the troops who are going to repay Gibeah of Benjamin for all the disgrace that it has done in Israel. And so the offense here that they are being punished for has nothing to do with the vile crime that was committed, but had brought disgrace upon Israel. Okay? Talk about being hypocritical. And so here we have, and the disgrace, by the way, that they're referring to is that they were supposed to be God's people and act certain ways. Now, this is avoiding everything that's happened in Judges up till now, by the way. And so we don't know, why they would be so quick to do something like that. Oh, my goodness. Okay, here we go. So all of the men of Israel gathered against the city, united as one. The tribes of Israel sent men throughout all the tribes of Benjamin, saying, what crime is this that has been committed among you? Now then, hand over those scoundrels in Gibeah, so that we might put them to death and purge the evil from Israel. But the Benjamites would not listen to their kinfolk, the Israelites. The Benjamites came together out of the towns of Gibeah to go out to battle against the Israelites. And on that day the Benjamites mustered 26,000 armed men from their own towns. Besides the inhabitants of Gibeah, all of this force, there were 700 picked men who were left-handed. Every one of them could sling a stone at a hare and would not miss. And the Israelites, apart from Benjamin, mustered 400,000 men, all of them warriors. Okay, so now we have this situation where we have a much smaller force taking on a bigger force, but yet, instead of using swords and shields, they're throwing rocks. Now that was pretty effective. in the ancient world, you get a good-sized rock and you hit somebody in the head, you're going to take them out. So we have these two armies that it's a mismatch from the very beginning technologically. You're using, a sharp pointy stick versus artillery. So that's what's going up here. And as you might imagine, what the first encounter might result in. The Israelites proceeded to go up to Bethel, where they inquired of God, which of us should go up first to battle against the Benjamites? And the Lord answered, Judah shall go up first. Now we got to remember something here. Notice what the question is. Notice what the question. They inquire of God, which of us shall go up and fight first? They didn't inquire of God, should we do this to begin with? Because God had not given them instruction on what to do or what not to do. Now remember, throughout the book of Judges and prior to this, God was having a conversation with people a lot. And as they drifted further and further and further away from God, the amount of interaction went down and down and down and down. And so here, they're speaking to God, and guess what? The question they asked ultimately is the wrong question. Because number one, they're presuming they're going to do this. Number two is that they're presuming that everything they were told was the truth and that the guilt and innocence is pretty clear cut and dry. They're presuming to know the mind of God when they gathered together in the first place to inflict damage upon the Benjamites. And so it's hypocritical to seek God's advice now when you've already made all these decisions that has led up to this. Plus, you've already said that you're drawing lots. You're taking a name out of a hat. Who's going to go first? And so asking the question of God was ridiculous because they had already made up their minds about everything, including who would go first, because they had already drawn the name out of the hat. So why would you do this if you've already done this? Well, to give legitimacy to what you're about. So they could say, oh, well, God condones what we're doing here. So that was what was going on. Now, it's a little bit after 11, and so I'm exceeding my time. But I just wanted to get into that. We're going to pick it up where we left off tomorrow. And then we're going to set the groundwork to study the kings of Israel and why, in this case, the case is being made for kings, and review a little bit about Saul and his kingship, and then move into David and his kingship, and then we're going to spend time on the kings successively as we move through the Bible. So have a wonderful day. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate you joining in. I just noticed, Ed, you're watching. Thank you very much for watching. David, thank you for watching. Really appreciate it. Means a lot to me to see that. Let's see. Retta, thank you for watching. Really appreciate you watching today. We're starting our units on the kings of Israel, and we just laid the groundwork from Judges at the end of the book of Judges to explain why we need kings in a human way. So we're going to go into a lot more depth and detail next time. Have a wonderful and blessed day. Thank you for tuning in. Please go to our YouTube page and subscribe. Please go to our Pinterest page and subscribe or follow. Follow us on all our social media so that in the search engines it'll be easier to find us. So take care. Have a wonderful and blessed day. Remember that God loves you, and so do I. Take care.